Hi guys, I'm Chris.
And I'm Mike.
And welcome back to this week's No Limits, a Rapp podcast. So how you doing this week, Mike?
Hey, I'm good. I want to hear about you, though. Are you in the mobile command center, the Suburban again this week, or are you in the warm, comfy house?
Unfortunately, I am not in the mobile command center. That is in Pennsylvania. I'm back in Virginia. Had to go to work this week, so... Yeah, but someone thought our mobile command center sounded good.
He liked the sound. Someone special, very important to this podcast. Kyle, he tweeted at us. He liked the sound of the Suburban. I don't know. Maybe you were onto something, Chris.
Maybe. He also said that we did a lot of thinking about Enemy at the States. So maybe too much thinking.
Enemy at the Gate, yeah. That we did. Speaking of Enemy, I got a question for you. It's been 2 weeks since the title announcement. Do you think we're getting the cover in the next few weeks? Do you think we'll have it by the end of the month?
I hope so. I hope so
too.
Based on the track record of the other ones, it should be coming soon. If not, late February, early March. So we'll see.
Yeah, we got to be close. Well, you guys know, the listeners, you will definitely get our thoughts, and we'll put in our 2 cents on the cover once it drops.
Definitely. So, just here at the top, we need to say, please, if you could, subscribe, rate, and review us using your favorite podcasting platform. Saying that here really help us to grow this podcast. And also, please, if you haven't already, sign up for our No Limits email updates. Just go to mitrappod.com. Also, this episode is coming out on President's Day, so happy President's Day, everybody. And in honor of President's Day, that Teespring merch is flying off the shelves, so we wanted to do a little something special for you, and everyone can have a 15% off coupon code to get your Mitrapp Pod gear. The special code is Alexander. So for President's Day, had to go President's Alexander, our newest president in the Mitrapp series, and
we meet him
longest running president, I think.
That's right.
Yeah,
we meet him in this book, Act of Treason, too. So it's a good time for this episode to come out on President's Day.
Yes, only fitting. Yes. So yeah, let's just go right in. What are we covering today, Mike?
Yeah, we're going to be covering Act of Treason, Part 1. Going roughly up until the halfway point, which would be about, did you say chapter 26, 27 or so? Somewhere in there?
25, 26, yeah, something like that.
25. So I think there's 55 chapters. We're going to be covering that. It's a shorter book, yeah. I don't know if you noticed, but we also get much longer chapters in the beginning. A lot of detail and expose on the background and what's been going on. Really extended prelude even.
Yes.
I think 30 pages or so.
Yeah, I do most of these by audiobook now, just because of time. And I'm used to being, 10, 8, anywhere between 7 and 12-minute chapters. And the prelude was 30-some minutes. And Georgia Goodell reads pretty fast, but I was just like, wow, this is a long prelude. I think we're going to get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get into that. And a theme that really runs throughout this book that we're going to keep coming back to is the devil in the details, or in this case, the assassin in the details. A lot of the plot, both the assassin and what he does, but also Rapp and his unraveling of the assassin's plans, really comes down to paying attention to the small details, running down every lead, trusting your people. And so we're going to keep coming back to this idea of devil in the details, how Vince is really cueing in and closing in and focusing in a really narrow way after we just finished 2 of his maybe biggest scope books, widest net that he throws in Memorial Day, Consent to Kill, and all the different places that takes us and places it takes Rapp and his emotions and his relationships. We're kind of narrowed in and focused in here. Rapp just doing what he does best, hunting down terrorists. So
yes. All right, so before we get into that, we always like to go to our source, Goodreads. Take it however you want to. And for this one, Act of Treason is coming in a little bit lower than our last couple at a 4.28. Still pretty good. And the Goodreads summary goes like this. It's a gorgeous autumnal day in Georgetown. The Democratic candidate for president and vice president of the United States are dutifully glad-handing voters and the media outside a grand estate where a national security conference has just been held, bringing together the world's greatest mind to discuss the issues that are threatening the country. It's America's politicking at its best. That's when all hell breaks loose. When presidential candidate Joshua Alexander's motorcade is ambushed by a group of terrorists, the nation is thrown into turmoil. 2 weeks following the attack, Alexander is carried to victory by a sympathy vote, but his assailants have not been found. On the surface, it appears to be the work of Al-Qaeda, despite the tremendous job that the U.S. and her allies have done eliminating terrorist cells within the heart of America. While the FBI and the rest of the government begin scouring the world for jihadists, CIA Director Irene Kennedy and Special Agent Skip McMahon are presented with classified information so toxic that they consider destroying it altogether, as it contains intelligence pointing to some of the most powerful players in Washington. Enter Mitch Rapp, the one man reckless enough to follow the evidence to its explosive conclusions. This journey takes him through the shadowy world of contract killers into the darkest corners of the globe and eventually back to Washington, where the fragile pillars of power are shaken to their core.
Short book, but not a short summary right there.
That is a very, I don't know. It was a good summary. Very long-winded. Very long-winded.
Might not be the best. I think the book was more enticing than that might make it sound, if that makes sense. I don't know. We'll get into it.
We'll get into it. I want to follow up on what you just said with right before the Goodreads section, talking about this theme and the idea of details. And I couldn't help but thinking when I was reading this book, the fact that we just came off, like you said, these two, I don't know, I want to call them epic tomes of Memorial Day and Consent to Kill. Like you said, I looked at the book. It's much smaller, 55 chapters. And then, as I said, I do audiobooks. So, like Consent to Kill, I think was like 16 and a half or almost 17 hours. This one comes in about 11 hours. So I knew right at the gate that it was going to be a much shorter book. I think Vince was doing this on purpose. It felt very purposeful, that this idea of, let's pare it down. We just went big, back to back. We went very in depth.
Yeah.
We went through this whole emotional turmoil in the last book. Let's do something different. I felt like this book was trying to do something a little bit different. And yeah, we were talking about how we're hitting a stretch of books where I don't really remember. I'm a big Mitch Rapp fan, but I don't quite remember all the details of the books like I have from these first couple ones that we've done more than a couple, but like this one, Protect and Defend, Extreme Measures. Like once I read them, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember reading this. But the only thing that really stuck out to me was actually the prelude and like what happens in it. And I don't know why that is, because this book I like it. It's a very good book. Like what just right off the bat, like your first impressions of the book.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I knew coming into this reread that there was a stretch here that I felt unsure about, if I recalled all the specifics. But as soon as I read the prelude, I'm like, oh, the motorcade hit. Of course. Yeah, I remember that's what Act was. And then I was like, wait, that all just happened in the first 20, 30 pages. And that's all I remember from Act was the presidential motorcade gets hit. I didn't even remember it was the president-elect's motorcade. I thought it was Alexander after he was sworn in.
Right.
And then I remember someone important dying. I thought it was one of the candidates or VP candidates, but it turns out it was
his wife.
Yeah, I kind of forgot that a little bit. So all that being said, I wasn't sure how I was going to get into the book and engage with it. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And I was going to ask, and maybe this will come out more once we finish recapping it. I think it's going to fall middle of the pack in all Rapp books. Like, for one that I forgot, I was a little nervous it was going to fall towards the bottom. But this might be a dark horse for, making its way to the middle of the pack, in maybe the top half even. I really enjoyed it upon reread. And then I remember we get Stu Garrett back at some point, our friend from Term Limits.
That was the one thing once on reread that I'm remembering, like, Stu Garrett come back. Because he's in Term Limits, right?
Yep.
And then we don't see him again.
We don't.
So And if you didn't read Term Limits, like if you only read the Mitch Rapp
he's just
books,
a new character.
He's a new character to you. Yeah.
I remember though in Term Limits when Mike Nance gets caught, and who else were they working with? There was one other in Arthur Higgins. You know, he gets brought down. I remember this one scene, and Stu doesn't get taken out, and he's kind of left to go and operate, and do what he does in the background. And I remember thinking, like, that's funny. Everyone else was like eliminated. Stu wasn't.
I thought, like, obviously Rapp's not there, but I thought Kennedy or Stansfield was like, you're never gonna work like in this town again.
Yeah, exactly.
And obviously enough time had passed, or I don't know. I don't know
why.
Well,
he's tempting fate. He's tempting fate because he's an egomaniac. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So, that fits his character.
I totally agree with you that this is. I don't know if I would put it in the top tier, like the top third, but definitely it's at the top end of the middle third for me.
Exactly. Yeah. And I guess we'll get to that in part 2 next week, where we actually rank it.
Yeah.
Let's dig into the plot though. So we open up with the motorcade being hit. We get a new character, Agent Rivera of the Secret Service, and she is really proud and hardworking that she's been promoted to the presidential detail, and before the transition, that is protecting the president-elect. And she's great at her job. Get a really good backstory of how she worked up the ranks. She proved it, and she's going to be the first leader of a female leader of a presidential protective detail. However, there's a little friction with a couple of her agents. They're very tired of being on the road, and part of that's because who they're protecting have been a pain in the ass. And we know that is Ross. Ross was picked by Josh Alexander to be the running mate, and Ross, of course, is the director of national intelligence that we've kind of grown to hate, almost hate, as much as Hank Clark over the last couple of books. So what do you think of hearing that he's going to be VP soon?
Yeah, looking back on it, right, in Consent to Kill, that whole second act is like trying to find these the killers. So we never really get back to the whole Ross mixing, like the whole like Ross scenes from the first part of the book. We don't ever like really touch that again. And in my mind, I'm thinking like, oh, we definitely see Ross again. And then we read this book, and then first, right off the bat, he got tabbed to be the vice presidential candidate. And we get Joshua Alexander, who just reading Total Power last year.
He's still around.
Played a huge part. I think we both mentioned on that pod that we quite like Alexander.
Yeah.
And I think you see here, especially in this novel, that why we liked him. Like he has these aspects, and I don't think he's like truly. He didn't know, although his wife was cheating on him. Didn't play a hand in trying to get rid of her. I don't know. It's, to me, bringing back Ross was like Vince wanted to sort of tie up some loose ends, along with bringing back Stu Garrett, right?
I like how and why Ross comes back, though. Alexander is the front runner for the Democratic Party, and he's going to, replace Hayes and run on the ticket. But one thing holding him back for the Democrats is his experience on national security. And for that reason, the party figures out that he's going to need a running mate who could garner some of those middle of the road votes, or even like take a few votes from the right and from the other side by being strong on national security. And so Ross, the director of national intelligence that Hayes appointed, would be a great pick to show the voter base that you have that experience in that field, because Alexander didn't. And so a little bit more on Alexander, actually. Let me read this quote, because this is the first time we meet him. And like you said, he's been through, it must be, 8 or 9 books, maybe 10, that he's been with us. So here's the first introduction we get of him, and I quote, "Alexander, the up-and-coming star of the Democratic Party, was governor of Georgia. The old white men who ran the party had finally got it through their heads that a Northeast liberal was simply unelectable. Their only real chance of winning was to draft a Southern governor who believed in Jesus Christ. This way, they could split the Bible Belt and steal enough red states to win it all. Alexander was the obvious choice. He was handsome, smart, and polished, and his wife's family had a lot more money than most third world countries. His only drawback was his relative youth. At 45, he was deemed a touch green, and definitely weak on foreign affairs. His early polling numbers suggested that people weren't even sure if he was a strong enough leader in the war on terror. He was 6'1" with black hair and the tan skin of a low-handicap golfer. He was polished in that southern televangelist sort of way. His suits were always a bit shinier than everyone else's, his hair a bit longish and perfectly styled, and his teeth a few shades too white.
When you're reading that, do you feel like Vince is trying to set this up that we're going to like this guy or not like this guy?
I think he's dropping a hint that he's going to be on our side, that he's actually making an effort to show his weakness, that even if he's not as tough on national security, and therefore, Rapp and Irene might take a back seat or those kinds of services, we at least know he's aware of that and trying to make up for it. And I also think he doesn't just say he's a straight up politician, because when Vince introduces a politician, I feel like the language is so strong and descriptive that they're a sleazeball. That,
right.
Remember when we met in the beginning of Term Limits, the first guy Coleman takes out?
Oh,
he was
some
fat cat senator. I remember getting just 3 pages of this guy would go to parties, he'd sleep with women, he'd be loose with alcohol. He's cheating on everybody, he's throwing away money, in bed, with all the lobbyist groups, he's taking money from them. I feel like when Vince wants to set up a character for that persona, he's going to hit us with it. So I think this is a very middle of the road. Alexander's green. He's going to take some working. He's going to have to be worked in and massaged in, but that he's someone we can work with.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like it's almost like a blank slate, that maybe he didn't know how the character of Alexander was going to go. Maybe he could be a villain in the future, maybe, or he could be like what we've seen throughout the novels, an ally of Rapp. He's grown to trust Rapp, especially in Kyle's books. I feel like him and Rapp have a pretty close connection, similar to what Hayes and Rapp have. So
that's true. Which all of this is interesting because we talked about the long prelude and the hit on the motorcade. Chapter 1 opens with Kennedy questioning her career and what she's going to do.
She thinks she's going to be fired, yeah.
Because Ross is going to be president and he's always had it out for her. And she's even thinking, like, do I ask Hayes for a pardon? And we get the seed planted that in this transition period, which, look at what we just had last month, happening here today. During this transition period, who's going to get pardons? Who should get a pardon? Because of political posturing, who will be put on the list or taken off the list? And the CIA director is saying, if someone wants to go through my past and really dig in, they can find some stuff. Should I contemplate asking for a pardon or pursuing that as a way to insulate myself if I do have to get out and jump ship or I get fired? Are they going to investigate me? And Ross and Stu Garrett, they'd love to do that.
Right, exactly.
So
you mentioned this long prelude, and I almost feel like in a previous book, this prelude would be multiple chapters, because we don't often see maybe once within a chapter do we go back and forth between 2 different settings, 2 different characters, but multiple times do we jump from Ross to Rivera and then to this new player, or a villain in this novel, Gabriel Gozich, right? Or is he going by Decus at this point?
Oh,
anyways,
Alexander Decus is his alias.
Alias, right?
His civilian alias, yeah.
So we have at least 3 to 5 different perspectives, and normally I feel like that would be 5 chapters. And we were discussing before the pod that if you did have those as 5 chapters, then you wouldn't actually see Rapp until chapter 7. And I feel like maybe it was like that, and then someone came in and was like, yeah, you can't have Rapp show up in chapter 7.
Show up that late, yeah.
If you make this all into one prelude, Rapp's only coming in at chapter 3, people won't get angry about that. I don't know. Maybe it's just like me overthinking it, but it's very interesting, the fact that we get this huge, long scene from multiple different perspectives in this, I don't know, probably one of the longest chapters in this whole entire series.
And we'll get to Rapp's first scene where he's really operating and how he comes back. Do you want to get into that, or do you want to talk about the actual hit on the motorcade? Because the devil in the details, it's really going to matter, the small nitty-gritty details of the hit.
Yeah,
You want to do that?
Let's talk about the hit first.
Yeah. So basically, you've got this guy Gazic, who is a hired hand. We don't know
From Serbia.
who hired him. Yeah, he's a former Yugoslavian. He was basically an assassin, throughout that entire region. Vince even writes, and I quote, "That was when Gazic turned his crosshairs from wild game to man for the first time. In certain ways, he found hunting man less of a challenge. In other ways, he found it more exhilarating." Kind of makes me think a little bit of The Most Dangerous Game, that short story, of hunting other humans and the thrill of it, which was an inspiration for Savage Son and Jack Carr's third novel. So a little bit of that kind of feel going on with Gazic being an assassin. He's hired for one of the most thrilling kills in his life. And he doesn't know who hired him, but he wants to pull it off perfectly. And basically his two thrills are long shot sniper kills, which he's trained for, or explosions. And he basically decides a high profile hit in DC, we're going with the explosion. They choose their timing. So the presidential motorcade is leaving Dumbarton Oaks, which, my old neighborhood, is in North Georgetown. They call it Georgetown in the book. It's a little closer to maybe I would call it Glover Park on Wisconsin Avenue.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. And so where the motorcade goes, pulls out of this national security conference, which again is Alexander trying to score brownie points saying, hey, I'm participating in a national security conference. Well, when the motorcade comes down, I believe it's P Street, and they make a right onto Wisconsin Avenue. And it's right a block short of the Safeway in Glover Park, North Georgetown, which is right near an old school I used to work at. Hardy Middle School is on the other side of the street. Right. So this is a block very familiar to me. And I could just imagine the motorcade making this right turn. And Gazic has a detonator. He's wearing a red Nats cap. He just got a Starbucks across the street, ordered double espresso. Details that are going to be very important in a minute. And he decides to shield himself from the blast, hiding behind a wide oak tree. Well, Agent Rivera, in charge of the detail, makes the turn. Right as they turn, out of the corner of her eye, she sees someone who looks suspicious. And it's really cool. She's great at her job because she says, quote, "Their concern was the nutbag. Their fear was the professional. The nutbag they could detect. They were the ones with wild eyes, dirty fingernails, and unkempt hair. Occasionally, they were women, but mostly they were men. Fidgety, nervous men who paced back and forth. They were for the most part mentally ill, which made them somewhat sympathetic, but no less lethal. The professional was an entirely different matter. The lone man who was cool enough to act, completely normal, right up until the moment he pulled out a gun and blew her candidate's brains out all over the sidewalk. That was why she stayed close." So when she sees that red hat hide behind the tree, planted the seed that she's like, oh shit, that's a professional. And a split second later, she was right. They go up in flames.
Yeah, and I guess to circle back slightly, so we had this whole scene where Rivera gets this word that, oh, they're leaving this thing, and he's not quite president-elect, but the presidential candidate's wife wants to go back to the hotel, and she tells this Secret Service agent, who is very edgy when she tells him, like, why are you putting me on this, like, it's this foreshadowing of like, oh, this is going to mean something in the future, and we'll find out why.
Agent Cash
are supposed to ride together in this limo, and they end up being the ones who are in the limo that gets hit, because right before the explosion, Gazic finds out, oh, you need to take out this one, not the other one. Yeah. And it's all these little details that are going to come out later on, because Gazic thinks that he's hired to kill the president. And right. he only gets paid, is it like $2 million or $2 million? So think about that, right? And he says, "Oh yeah, that's a great price for But think about the last novel, right?
Yeah, Rapp was how much?
Rapp was like a couple, like 10 million or 15 million almost, right?
Yeah, I think Abel was going to get upwards of 15-20 million, and the Goulds, for actually carrying it out, we're going to get 7 or 8 million.
Yeah.
And so here's a $2 million hit that he thinks is a lot,
For the
for
president.
the presidential candidate. Like, that's crazy.
Not even the presidential candidate.
Yeah. Well, I think elect at this point. I think it's after the election.
No. That's why he wins, because he loses his wife, remember?
You're right. That's right.
They're down in the polls.
He's a candidate.
He's the candidate, and then it's a pity vote, essentially. Yeah.
That's right. The explosion turns the tide, and they actually win because of it.
Yes.
That's right. Once again, all these details that play such a central role of how Irene and Rapp and crew, well, really actually Rapp, because Irene's hands are tied elsewhere. Really, Rapp and Marcus are going to track everything down with all these little details that Agent Rivera recalls. It's almost in that sense, did you get this, as I think about it, it's kind of more like a murder mystery novel. It's like an Agatha Christie almost, a whodunit, in the sense of, it's not a whodunit where we don't know who done it, although it's a whodunit of who's behind it, and a whodunit in the sense of all the clues were there. It just took this omniscient perspective to step back and look at the details. Because while this is happening, Skip meeting with Irene, and he's been in charge of the investigation, but he's going nowhere. There's a theory that Agent Rivera thought she saw someone in a red hat who might be suspicious, but the FBI doesn't track it down because that's nothing to go off of. But again, that's the clue for someone like Rapp, who is so attuned, and his spidey sense, like you said last time, is going off. So he has Marcus follow up the red hat, which leads them to the Starbucks and looking at the security camera. I'm getting ahead of myself, but did you get the sense it's kind of like an unraveling a murder mystery kind of book?
No, I once you said that, I totally agree that, if you think about, is Flynn trying to like mimic or do, not mimic, but, he did his Bourne book in the third option, right? And so in this one, he's doing like a murder mystery type thing you're talking about, where the pieces are all there, even though the reader may know all of them from the beginning. Slowly does he release more things, and then at the end you get like this full picture. So
yeah, interesting.
So right, there's 6 months between the explosion at the end of the prelude and the beginning of chapter 1, and boy, do we get a bombshell. Irene and Skip meet this like Republican senator, right, or congressman, whatever, who has this information and gives him these pretty explicit photos of the now president-elect's wife.
Oh, the campaign manager. That's right.
No, is he a campaign manager?
I think he was the campaign manager
for
doing opposition research for the other guy, for the Republican.
Yeah.
And he got opposition research on Alexander and his wife, which were some pretty illicit photographs.
Yes. And these photographs are going to be key in understanding why someone, again, building these small little details further and further, understanding why someone would want to target the second limo.
And Kennedy holds that information, close to her chest. She's not going to put that out there. So Skip on the FBI is the only one who knows about it, but he has no leads to track down. Kennedy knows this, and the whole time, everyone is thinking it's got to be Al-Qaeda or some foreign terrorist. There were even some memos saying the terrorists wanted to disrupt the election. And so everybody at first, even Rapp, throughout this whole thing, before he finds out who Gazich is, he's thinking, the Arab fundamentalists have to be behind this, right? But Kennedy's photographs about this scandal and the wife cheating is going to play a role in saying, no, maybe the person who ordered this hit is not necessarily a foreigner, but might have actually more involvement in the government from the inside.
I feel like these photographs sort of build a little bit of attention because it's something that Irene knows, but she needs to tell Mitch. But Mitch is like, later on, he's like staying away from Irene and the CIA, so he needs this crucial. It's like the key he needs that she holds, type to put everything together. So it's there.
Yeah,
we get it so early, yet Mitch doesn't know until much later, right?
So true. Speaking of Mitch, though, we're the Mitch Rapp podcast. Let's get into his role in this book when he's finally called back. And Chris, you brought up something interesting to me. We do get a little hint of what's been going on post Consent to Kill with Mitch. How did you feel Vince handled the heaviness of where Mitch was at the end of Consent to Kill and bringing him back into this book?
So I think me and you disagree on this. I wanted not a 2 to 3 paragraph explanation away. I wanted like half the book on the Bender, what Mitch has been doing since, being on that beach and tossing the gun into the wake, right? I wanted that. I was craving that. I felt a little bit left down here. Just getting this, boom, quick explanation. And then he saw like this news on the television that the president got exploded, and then boom, he like snapped back in. That's fine, like that he snapped back in, but I don't know. I wanted a couple of chapters diving deep into Mitch's psyche, almost like what we get a little bit in American Assassin with like the whole, I forget the psychiatrist or psychologist names, whatever.
I know who you're John Lewis. Lewis?
Lewis. Dr. Lewis. Yeah, that's what it is.
Dr. Lewis. Yep, that's it.
Those scenes we got where he's trying to penetrate, and I mean, obviously, we get it in a couple chapters that Brooks wants him to go to therapy, and that's not going to happen. But I don't know. What did you think, Mike?
I was okay with it. I think I had a bit of a different feel than you, because I was kind of glad we got it, and it was pretty quick, and then we're back to Rapp being, drawn into the game. So he's basically, he goes on an opium binge in Bangkok, had a few women he was involved with in different countries. It made him feel worse about himself. We do get little descriptions like that. But I appreciate how he turns on the TV one night in, boy, where was he? Calcutta. You're kind of in nowhere, India. Realize you've been on an opium binge. You're sleeping around. You feel even worse about yourself. But what does it take to get Rapp right back into the game? A terrorist hit. Like the presidential motorcade blew up weeks before an election. To me, that's enough to watch Rapp clean up his act, snap back into it, get on a plane, and immediately want to get down to business and do what he does. So I was okay with that.
I'm going to pick nits here, but what if you, instead of having that, you jump to a chapter where you describe like this woman laying in a bed, and then a description of Mitch, and then he takes a hit of whatever, and then the news plays on the TV, and then like you actually like get it in a chapter form as opposed to like this like exposition almost of it.
I if we're watching a movie, yes, you have to have that cutscene. There's smoke up in the air. The camera pans down. Woman rolls over.
Half naked woman. Yeah.
Rapp is so groggy. Looks at the alarm clock. Is like, oh shit. Rubs his eyes. Yeah, you're right. In the writing, I don't think I needed that. I got enough of it to be planted in my mind.
I'm thinking about it as on the screen, as I often try to do with these novels.
That's true.
So.
No, that's true. That would be a very powerful scene. I think I felt that way because I kind of in my mind was like, oh shit, he's on an opium banger. He's waking up in the middle of Calcutta. I'm like, whoa. To me, that was enough of a description to pique my interest.
I think if you do the movie, you don't do the prelude, because the movie would be better if you don't know who killed it, who like does the explosion. You just have that. You have Mitch on this bender, and then boom, news comes across, and he's like, what the hell is happening? And then he has to sort of get out of it.
Sure. I think the opening scene, though, would be Agent Rivera. Really strong character, just how she's walking and handling herself, showing how good she is.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But then she gets a cranky Secret Service agent who's like, more of this shit, and he's talking back to her, and she like, get your ass in the car, protect your protectee, get her to the destination, get out of there, and then boom, the motorcade blows up. To me, that would be a hell of a cold open. And then you cut to Rapp waking up.
In reading this novel, this would be a really good one to turn into a movie.
This would be a great movie. I agree.
An easily adaptable screenplay, I feel like.
I agree. Absolutely. And I think the next scene we should get into, because Rapp's back in the game. And again, devil in the details. Let's lead up to this scene in Cyprus, Limassol, Cyprus. And how the heck does Rapp track a single guy from almost no intel about this hit to Cyprus? Well, takes our boy Marcus Dumond. Rapp is also working with other intelligence agencies, and he's asking for, do you know somebody who, and there's a couple of descriptions Rapp is able to narrow down. Do you know somebody who is capable of doing this professional hit, leaving no traces behind, but also dumb enough to take a contract on an American president or a presidential candidate's motorcade? So he's thinking it must be someone out of the mainstream, not one of the top tier assassins who's active right now. Kind of like a second tier guy on a list that maybe hasn't been active lately.
Yeah, like Louis Gould.
He was the height of his game.
Claudia even says, like, heads of state, kind of untouchable unless the price is right, and they wouldn't do it for $2 million,
No, absolutely not. I think they wouldn't even take the American president. He would have turned it down.
They had to think about taking Mitch Rapp, like, are they going to take? Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, but
it's interesting. But Gazich is working in Africa. Like, that's his thing lately. So Rapp was right. He's not one of the top guys. He's taking hits in sub-Saharan Africa. He's making money, and he has this like cover business that is making bank off of international humanitarian aid contracts. So it's like, and that's where he's Alexander Dekas, which is his alias as a Greek national running this humanitarian organization to kind of make bank. And then Rapp saying, okay, if there was no trace of these guys, it's got to be a small team, 3 men at the most, more likely 1 or 2. And then he's still thinking it must be terrorists. So he's thinking they don't mind making money or taking money from anybody. And so Dekas, the fact that he's ripping off, developing communities and taking international aid and humanitarian funds, Rapp knows this is a guy who isn't just going to take clean money. He's going to take dirty money. So he could have been hired for a hit like this. I think it's the French, the DGST and other, no, it's a Turkish intelligence service. Rapp has all his contacts, who says, I think we know a couple of guys that fit your description. And one of the names is Alexander Dekas. And so Rapp goes and tracks some people down. Meanwhile, Marcus is reviewing the Starbucks tape, and he has facial recognition algorithms, which back then was probably the new thing to start doing. And I love this description about Devil in the Details. The assassin's good enough to have the red cap over most of his face, blocking it from the cameras. But Rapp says he doesn't even need to see the face. What was more important to him was that he got to see how the assassin moved. His body language, how he carried himself. So the Starbucks footage would help Rapp later identify when he sees somebody working undercover, if they have the same movements, the same body language. I thought that was really smart. And then the last thing that got them to Cyprus was he ordered a double espresso, which maybe back then at Starbucks, people weren't doing their fancy drinks. He's like, a straight double espresso, it's got to be someone from the Eastern European or Mediterranean areas. And he starts tracing down these leads in the region.
Right, and you missed one thing that Rapp immediately knows that it's not a terrorist because, well, one, there would be like a body or whatever, but this whole thing about how Rivera saw him behind a tree.
Yep.
And Rapp goes to the scene of the crime and sees that, that would be the exact place that I would choose to stand if I was going to, do the same bomb. And so he knows it has to be some sort of player, some sort of assassin,
A terrorist
not
would have made
like,
a video.
Exactly.
Standing in the middle of the street, Allahu Akbar, and put it up everywhere.
So it's like a combination of all those details with the help of Marcus that they're able to bring him to be sitting across from this cafe, waiting for this Dekas guy.
Yep. Cool scene from here on out. Limassol, Cyprus, this cafe. Rapp's up in a hotel. Well, actually, he's at the cafe, and he's scouting it out with Agent Brooks. Is that his new partner here?
Yes.
Brooks. And I like how they're undercover as a
married couple
on the honeymoon. And although she's genuinely pissed about how Rapp is demanding to her and, not opening up at all, not really being a true partner in terms of professional work and being chummy, and she gives it to him. And it fits the cover because if they're on a honeymoon, they might also be fighting. And so he's like, don't make a scene. And she's like, I'm yelling at you saying I should have never married you. Well, that fits the cover pretty well, and throws a glass of wine in his face in the middle of this cafe. So she's both undercover doing that, but she's also seriously pissed at him.
Yes, that was a funny scene.
That was pretty fun. But so she's out of the picture now. She's not helping Rapp, and that's the exact moment where Rapp sees some fishy stuff. Some guys down the block sitting in a car with eyes on the cafe. And when he goes to his hotel room later, he watches one of these guys come out of the car, whisper something to the cafe owner's ear, this old man, and slip money into his pocket. And so Rapp's like, shit, after chasing down all these leads, somebody else is looking for the same guy I'm looking for. There must be something to that.
Right. And at this point, Rapp's on his own, and he calls Scott, tells him that he needs to, hurry up and get there. I think Scott was on his way, but he's been held up at the airport for some reason. And obviously Brooks just stormed out. So this then leads to what we're going to see over the next couple chapters, that Rapp is on his own and has to make quick decisions because he doesn't have backup, but he thinks that this could be the guy based on what he's about to see. So Gazich comes in riding high after the kill, does a quick little phone call to that cafe owner you just mentioned, and they obviously have some sort of system set up where he can tip him off.
Yep.
Gets the tip off that someone's watching him, so he comes in super attentive. And you're like, oh, who's watching him? Well, it's not Rapp, it's these Russians. So Gazich strolls up and proceeds to kill one of the Russians that is sitting in the car. And Rapp, meanwhile, is watching all this. And it's the fact that Rapp sees this that he then starts to put into pieces, oh, wait, this is the guy.
Yep.
This is who we're looking for. I need to get him now, right?
Yeah. The Russians, too. So Rapp is like, I got to come away with at least one of these guys alive, get intel from them, and interrogate them. One of them has already been killed by Gazich in this car. He sees, it's kind of cool here because he notices Gazich again on the rooftop of another building nearby. And even though Gazich's apartment, registered through this fake company in this business, is above the cafe, Rapp is smart enough to scan the skyline and see a guy pop up on another building, and he starts jumping roofs. So Rapp's like, oh shit, somebody's after him. He's on the run for some reason. And Rapp's like, I got to get him before he gets out, while he sees two more Russians going into the cafe who are going to intercept him in the apartment. So now he's got the cafe owner, who he doesn't know if he's in on the game. He somehow was involved and tipped off Gazich. Two Russians going up. And he's got Gazich, the professional assassin, and Rapp knows he's got to take one of them alive at least. With no backup, Brooks is gone. Harvath, oh my God. Scott Coleman's, I got black ice on my mind. Scott Coleman's tied up at the airport. Rapp goes in to take him. He's got a pretty elaborate scheme. He gets up the staircase, goes through the cafe, is able to kill one of the Russians in the hallway or the stairwell. He drags him into another side room. Then he goes to listen in the main room, and he definitely hears Gazich with the other Russian. And it sounds like he's interrogating him. Like, who are you? Why are you watching me? Why are you after me? And so Rapp's got a lot to deal with. Eventually, the old man from the cafe comes up. So now Rapp's got to incapacitate the old man. And he doesn't think he's guilty of anything. He's just the landlord, for this apartment where Gazich lives. So he ties him up and says, look, you'll get out of here alive if you work with me and drag this Russian down the hallway and hang out, Essentially, he sidelines them. Oh, and it was funny because Rapp is deciding what to do with the Russian who keeps just screaming, untie me. I work for a fellow, intelligence service. Let me go. I'm so glad you're here. And Rapp says... Or Flynn writes, Rapp leveled the pistol at the Russian's groin. All three green dots lined up in a row. Shut the fuck up or I'll blow your balls off. Groin injuries could be messy. Really messy. Lots of blood and lots of pain. I just love that. How Rapp quickly decides what he might want to do with this Russian who just won't shut up. Then this is awesome from Rapp. He's outside this door and he's ready to go in. He knows he needs one alive. He actually takes out the supersonic rounds from his pistol.
Yes, I love this part. Yeah.
He's like, if I use this and it goes through any sort of armor they're wearing, I could kill him. I need a slower bullet, and it's going to make noise that would tip off other people if there are more Russians around. So for a bunch of reasons, Rapp is smart enough to change out his mag to these slower bullets that will be less impactful and make less noise.
Yeah, it's this whole scene, and we get one of the things I wanted to bring up here is I feel like we get a great extended cut of this entire Lima Soul scene from most of the time in the Mitrap books or the Vince Lund books. We're going from like one chapter is in DC, one chapter is with Rapp, one chapter is with the villain who could be in a completely different city. We're jumping around a lot. Here, we are jumping. If we are jumping around, we're going from Gazich, who's across the street, to Rapp.
To the cafe owner, to Rapp.
To the cafe, yeah. And I think we actually even get 3 Rapp-centric chapters in a row. Yeah. Which is, I can't remember ever getting that, really.
Yeah.
And I
makes
really,
the scene...
Really enjoyed it. Yeah, I was just going to say I enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. It makes the scene complete in a sense that we don't often see Rapp operating. I think one of the only cutscenes is probably the last storyline we'll talk about, what Ross is doing to schmooze it up with, the bankers in Switzerland and the environmental community. But that might be the only cutscene from this whole thing. We get everything we just described to you, boom, back to back to back. It's pretty awesome to have that for once.
Yeah, and one of the other things you mentioned, we mentioned details, is right before Rapp goes into this room to get Gazich, he literally can visualize how the room is going to be laid out. He previously, when he was over in the hotel watching, Marcus called him and gave him important intel that Gazich was a sniper, and this causes him to back up from the window because he's like, oh shit.
Yep, that's right.
And then he uses that information to figure out, all right, this guy's a sniper, probably has a desk, a credenza, whatever, but it's going to be positioned here because he's a sniper. He's always thinking about angles and trajectories and shit like that. So he knows when he comes in where he's going to have to be looking. I really love the descriptions that Vince gives us here. And then boom, comes in, working alone, has to take out, sees that Gaz is just trying to get information from this Russian, and has to act quickly. And Mike, I want you to describe, you were talking about this earlier, I want you to describe this whole crucifixion scene, as Irene calls it later.
Yeah, Irene's like, why'd you crucify him with 4 bullets? And I mean, that's going to come in the next part, but Rapp's going to take a lot of flack for what happens in these next, I guess what would be like 5 seconds of live time, but probably over a couple of pages. And so I went back to reread it, and I wanted to see the detail. And that's why this theme stood out to me, because later in the book, it's going to be super key. What happens in these next couple of pages is super key. Rapp swings the door open, and it's so cool. He knows to sweep with the motion of the door, because if the door only opens 45 degrees, you have at least a little protection. And then as the door opens, he sweeps the gun with the opening of the door. And when it's about 90 degrees open, he sees Gazich, and he sees a gun in hand that's moving from the Russian up to him. So he shoots his hand, gets him to drop the gun. Rapp actually assesses here while his window of vision opens up, as the door goes past 90 degrees, he has a fuller point of view. The Russian is incapacitated. It looks like, Gazich, took care of him. And so that's not a threat. So he scans back to Gazich, and he sees he's still standing, even without his gun, but he starts reaching for it. And so then Rapp kneecaps him, hits him in both knees. Gazich doesn't quite go down right away. Gazich is acting as if he can still reach for his gun when he realizes his legs aren't working, and that's when he falls to the ground. Rapp actually puts his gun down so that it's perpendicular to the floor. He's not pointing it at anyone as he reassesses the situation. I mean, he shot the guy 3 times. However, in that split second, he sees Gazich go for his gun about 4 inches away from his other hand, his good hand, his last remaining limb, and Rapp deliberately thinks, this guy's just not going to give up. I'm acting alone. He raises his gun again and says, I've got no other options but to fully incapacitate all 4 of his limbs. Hits his other hand right when it's an inch away from picking up his gun. So Rapp is doing what he's got to do. He's taking care of business. He's on the ground. He's the professional. And now he's getting a little bit more control of the situation.
Yeah, and I think this is crucial to think about here because from Irene's perspective or anyone else, like let's say the FBI's perspective, you could totally see Rapp interrogating this guy and slowly shooting him for, 4 times.
Did you torture him? Kind of thing.
That's what they're thinking. But in the moment, Rapp's not doing this seductively. Rapp's not doing this out of pleasure.
He's staying alive.
It's purely, he's by himself. He's doing what he's trained to do, and he incapacitates the guy. It doesn't kill him. Doesn't kill him. He needs to get information from him, right? He could easily have just done a headshot and taken him out from not even opening the door.
He could have.
So, yeah. I don't know. These minute details. That's why I loved your theme you came up with. The devil in the details here is very crucial for this entire story.
Yeah, and that's going to pay off in the second half big time when the politicians back at home, including this new guy, we're not sure what to think of him yet, Alexander, wants to put him on trial. And it's like, would a confession hold up if you had 4 bullet holes in you and, you were making a confession, or is that considered torture? And if you try to pursue in a court of law a case against this guy, what's it going to look like? The whole FBI put together a file versus the CIA, Black Ops, do what you got to do. And that's going to play a role in the political arena in the second half of this book. So I guess one transition point here to get us ready for the next half is we find out this thing goes a bit deeper than we thought. There's a bit of a deep state element going on here. Rapp is tracking down leads. He's trying to figure out why Gazich did this and who hired him and, who the Arabs are that he's taking money from. Yet, over in Switzerland, our friend Mark Ross, now you're right, President-elect Ross, is schmoozing it up. Vice President-elect is schmoozing it up with this very flamboyant banker in Switzerland. We get a couple of scenes about what the banker is into in his personal life, some S&M, and some other, erotic and exotic showcases. But anyway, Ross is schmoozing it up with this guy, and he takes him into his wine cellar. And a little note here is that they sideline, I think it was Agent Brown, the agent assigned in the Secret Service to protect Ross, and they say, we're just going to be a minute, we're going down in the wine cellar. And they completely leave him out of the picture, knowing that, the protectee can't be out of his line of sight, and Brown is stuck at the top of this elevator like, shit, they just disappeared. So it's, once again, friction that Ross is not going to be kind to law enforcement and the intelligence and military once he's the big dog. But they meet a friend in the wine cellar lurking in the shadows, Green. And this guy, Cy Green, is kind of putting the screws to Ross, saying, hey, you better come through with, our deal. Ross promised him a pardon. In exchange for the hit, Stu Garrett and Ross were involved in getting the hit on Alexander's wife, and they were going to promise a pardon to Green. So he's an American citizen who's been exiled and, is on the most wanted list, and they were going to secure a pardon for him as part of the deal for taking the hit.
Yep. And that's going to lead us into the whole machinations of trying to figuring out who is this Cy Green guy? Or we kind of know who he is, but like, how deep is everybody involved? And then this small detail that, so once Rapp incapacitates Gazich, he calls Scott, gets him to come, calls Irene. And there's this interesting thing where like he says he can't trust his own people because of all the leaks. So like he buys like a cheap burner phone and chucks it out and doesn't say a lot on the phone. Gets a plane, or is able to get a plane. They're able to bring back one Russian and Gazich. On the plane, though, he gets sidelined by the president, the outgoing president, being a little bit overzealous in saying, we got this guy. And now Hayes tells Alexander they got the guy who killed his wife, and Alexander wants to put him on trial. And this sends Rapp into like, what the fuck are you guys
A
thinking
frenzy.
about? Like, yeah. So that whole action with Hayes and Alexander puts in motion what's going to happen and take us through into the next part of this book, where Rapp now like, okay, I need to get information out of Gazich. Tortures him / withholds morphine from him. He squeals like a pig, and that's where we get this minute detail that right before the explosion, he got the okay. Hit the second
limo.
Hit the second one, and Rapp's like, "Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if Rivera switched to limos, stuff like that." So they had to have had a spotter looking at the limos, right?
Yeah.
Rapp gives up Gazich to Brooks, tells him to take him to the FBI. Meanwhile, he goes off, and we'll talk about it next time. Goes off to be with Marcus and potentially figure this out.
Yeah.
So we're left pretty much with Gazich is supposedly back with Brooks in CIA custody.
She's taking him in.
She's taking him in. Ross has just met with Green, is coming back to the United States, has this whole pardon problem when he gets confronted by Stu Garrett, who's not happy about that. And then finally, Brooks meets with a couple of the top brass at the CIA, and they want to know what the hell Mitch Rapp did. And that's the end of the first half.
And where is he? It's like that scene when she was convinced to bring in Gazich, Rapp had to talk her into it.
Right.
Because she was mad at Rapp about how he was operating in the field and being kind of, a prick. And she walked out on the operation and she's like, we're not going back. We got to go report in. Like, you got to come and we got to take Gazich. And they said they want to put him on trial and we're bringing him back. And Rapp's convinced her and says, if you trust me, there's something fishy going on here. Tell them you don't know where I am. And Brooks ends up trusting Rapp, even though she just reamed him out and said, you're fucked up.
You need to go to therapy. Yeah.
You got to see a shrink. Yeah. She literally, very few people have talked to Rapp like that. It felt a little out of character for me, but she's spot on. She's like, you got to talk to somebody about this shit you've been through. Stop feeling bad for yourself and want everybody to feel bad for you about your wife and everything. And you just end up being an asshole to everybody. She's like, you're fucking Mitch Rapp. Go talk to somebody, figure it out, man up. And she's like, you don't want to see a shrimp because you don't want to be seen as weak. And being seen as weak is the worst thing that could possibly happen to Mitch Rapp. And she's like, well, get over it. But in the end, she knows he's good. And she says, sure, I'll trust you on this one. So she brings in Gazich. And I love this part. I think is it Hackett or Strobel? I think it's Strobel. Dan Strobel shows up at the airport wearing a maintenance worker's uniform. And he's able to do a bait and switch. They put two vans back to back. They slide Gazich's body into one van, and Rapp goes into the other van. And so anyone who was watching them wouldn't think anything shady went on because this airport worker just did that. And meanwhile, Strobel drives Rapp and the Russian out of Dodge, out of town. And Brooks and Gazich take off in the other van to go turn themselves in and report back at Langley. So I love that airport scene. I can imagine on the tarmac, just a maintenance worker driving up in a truck or whatever, and they're up offloading packages and they're offloading boxes, but they do this bait and switch to get Rapp out of the picture. And the Russian, they're going to disappear the Russian. No one knows they have a second guy who is somehow involved. And Rapp thinks, I can maybe get information from him and figure out who is watching Gazich, who's, what's their insurance policy. So they're not tied to Gazich. They hired these Russians who turned out to be Belarusians to take him out. Yeah, we got a lot to unpack still in part two.
The Russian in the end is probably more important than Gazich.
Exactly.
Because Gazich didn't know who actually hired him, right?
But the Belarusians will know who hired them.
Yeah, the Gazich pretty much gives up all of his information that he has during that one scene in the airplane. So
Gazich he even admits, I was the guy with the red hat. I was in Starbucks. I bought a double espresso. I had the red hat. I hid behind a tree. He pretty much gives himself up and he says, but I'm just as confused as you. Why did they tell me to hit the second limo if that wasn't the candidates? If my boss, the people who hired me wanted me to hit the candidates, why'd they tell me a second limo? And him and Rapp, even he's got 4 bullets in him, and Rapp's withholding morphine. They're kind of on the same page there for a quick second. They're both like, wait, you didn't do this? And then Gazich is like, wait, you don't know about this? And they're both like, what the fuck is going on here? Who wanted to kill the president-elect's wife?
Right. Yeah, no, it's a very enlightening moment for Rapp, you know?
Yeah, exactly. That's when he starts moving away from this idea of Islamic fundamentalists.
Yeah, and I need to also distance myself from whoever, you know, who could be involved in this, and I need to figure that out, right?
Someone in the inside, someone involved or had a stake in changing the election. And that's ultimately the role that why Stu Garrett wanted to do this, because he's the political operative. He knew they were way behind in the polls. He knew they had no way of winning. And so he knew getting the sympathy vote with killing off Alexander's wife will do 2 things. It will get them the sympathy vote, turn the tide of the election, but 2, it would prevent the scandal from getting out. Because if the scandal that she was sleeping with her Secret Service, protective detail got out, that would also tank the election for them. And so Garrett thinks he's smart by ordering this hit and tying up 2 loose ends to secure the election, which looked like a long shot for them. There's a lot going on.
I really like this book. I didn't think I liked it when I started reading it, but I really like it. It's good.
Yeah, like this is an intricate plot that happens in a short number of pages, but it gives you something to think about. Like this was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it too, and I can't wait to unpack it. I already jumped ahead a bunch in this episode, just getting excited for part 2.
No, definitely. We have more time to talk about the covers and the winners and losers, stuff like that next time. So,
you know what else we do in part 2? Covers, winners and losers, and I didn't have it ready this time, so
got to give us your limerick
for a double limerick. Exactly. So lots more to come, even though we gave away some of the goodies in part 1 here.
Yes. All right. So yeah, we'll be covering part 2 of Act of Treason next week, so look out for that. We need to definitely thank our patrons, our special operator Sherry F, and our special agents George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, and Jeff. I said it at the top, but I'll say it again. Please subscribe, rate, and review us using your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us online at mitrappod.com or using our Twitter and Instagram handle at mitrappod. And as always, just let Mitch be Mitch. Disclaimer, this podcast is not affiliated with Vince Flynn, Kyle Mills, or Simon & Schuster, although we thank them very much for their content. The music soundtrack is Guerrilla Tactics by Raphael Crooks. Boom, baby.